I felt the cold breeze rush through my body as I crossed the silent intersection of a once busy hive block. The recycled air traveled faster through the corridors and passageways of the massive hive city, now that there were fewer bodies in the streets to prevent the flow. It makes most of the hive colder, so much so in fact that the few of us that are left have to bundle up whenever we leave our homes. For 27 solar years I've called Hive Sicarius my home. I've made it out of the Manufactorum district and into the Hab Block Delta at only age 17. I still remember how wonderful the habitation block was compared to the slums of the working district. Gone was the putrid smell of sulfur being pumped out from the forge complex where my parents and their parents worked their entire lives. It was replaced with the delicious smell of barbecued grogs coming from the butcher's market. But that too is gone. The market is nothing more than a 2-block long wall of propaganda. Its windows and doors are sealed by metal plating and steel bars. As for its residents, they too are gone. One by one, each family closed their shop, abandoned their homes, and left their entire lives behind. The propaganda posters that started it all flutter in the cold wind of their empty shops. These posters are everywhere now, in thick white lettering on bright red backgrounds. The message can be seen from blocks away. Salvation for 50 thrones. It's funny, each poster carries the official seal of the Diocese of Sicarius, but I don't remember the original posters having that approval of the Adeptus Ministorum. Not that it matters anymore. 50 thrones was a full solar month's salary. I can't remember which family was the first to pay it, but it was more than likely one of the wealthy shop owners that could afford the high price. They were the first to leave. I do remember curiously watching the smiles on their faces of the families that boarded up their shops and walked off, never to be seen again. But it was my turn to leave. With 50 thrones in my pocket, I made the same pilgrimage that all the others had made, down towards the wastewater reclamation district. It was difficult to leave my home. I don't understand how or why the others were so eager to leave, but I had no choice. The Hablock was nearly abandoned now. The only ones left were beggars and cripples that either couldn't afford the price or were left behind by their families. The road out was terrifying. It was littered with half-eaten corpses of the poor, their bodies decaying on street corners, some still alive while the hive chem rats chewed on their flesh. I tried my best to ignore the begging and the cries for help, focusing instead on the massive archways of the reclamation district, the words on the posters that covered the walls around me reminding me of my mission. Salvation. Salvation is what I hope to find. As I stepped across the archway, I heard a low rumbling hum off in the distance. An uneasy feeling came over me as I looked up at the winding metal stairwells that sloped up into the heart of the reclamation district. Making my way up, I felt as if I was being watched. The wind got colder the higher I climbed, and at every platform, it was the same abandoned sight. Boarded up shops and posters everywhere. It was as if this district was emptier than my own half-block. Taking a small break on one of the platforms, I listened closely to the humming. At this elevation, I could distinguish the sound better. It was in fact a rhythmic chanting. Suddenly I felt a hand come across my shoulder and quickly wrap around me in a chokehold. The exhaustion of climbing all of those stairs didn't even let me give out a cry for help. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by 4 men, each one of them holding what looked like electrified blades, the tip of the weapon sending shocks down my body as the main thug brought it closer. "Give us the money," he ordered. I was so terrified I couldn't even speak. I just stared into his eyes, both of which had multiple pupils. These weren't ordinary humans, they were mutants. If these abominations were this far into the hive city, it must have meant that the outer hive walls were all abandoned. As the mutant reached into my pocket, I heard a loud pop, followed by an instant spray of blood splattered on my face. The thief holding onto me released his grip, and I collapsed on the ground as he took off running. 2 more of the mutants fell dead as 4 robed individuals fired las pistols in their direction. I looked at my defenders, and I recognized the colors of their robes. They were Ministorum priests. It was such a bizarre sight to see 4 armed priests. As I wiped the blood from my face with my sleeve, one of the men approached and helped me up. He looked me over, and without saying a word, he smiled and nodded for me to follow him. Still in shock, I hesitated for a second, but the priest paused and looked back He nodded for me to follow him up the staircase. I walked towards him as the other priests began to search the dead mutants. The rest of the way, I was guided by this rogue priest who didn't even acknowledge my gratitude for saving my life. He simply smiled and kept climbing. We finally reached another archway at what looked like the highest spire of the reclamation district. In fact, I could see the other districts pretty clear from the edge of the railing. They all looked empty. The Ministorum priest stopped in front of the archway and looked at me. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Ready for what?" I questioned. "To speak to the God Emperor." The sentence felt so strange. Never in my entire life had I contemplated the thought of actually being able to speak to God. 50 thrones is all it takes to step across the arc and experience salvation. His words were so foreign to my ears, I couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening. Salvation for 50 thrones? The priest reached out his hand, calling for my donation. "He is our salvation," he said. I don't know if this was guilt or fear, but something inside of me felt like I wasn't worthy of this. I felt shame as I paid the priest. He stepped back and pointed in the direction of the archway. The chanting that had been growing in intensity stood right on the other side. Stepping across the arc, I was greeted by a massive amphitheater filled with thousands of worshippers performing the same rhythmic motion, chanting in a language completely foreign to me, and all facing the stage. At the center of the stage was a large black-shaped orb. After a couple of seconds, a man stepped onto the stage and walked towards the object. The orb contorted its shape and revealed an opening where the man was able to walk in. The orb closed itself after the body was fully inside, and this process continued over and over again as each worshipper, one by one, was allowed to commune with the Emperor of mankind. It was almost impossible to take my eyes off the orb. As much as I wanted to turn to the people next to me and ask what was going on, the pull I felt from this object was unbreakable. Before I knew it, I too was in sync with the rest of the crowd, chanting and moving involuntarily. I felt trapped inside my own mind. The more I focused on where I was and what I was doing, or tried my best to interrupt my movements, the more a sense of dread and abandonment haunted my mind. And it was only when I focused on the orb that the feeling of the impending doom went away. I don't actually know how long it took me to reach the orb, or if anyone else was still around me. All I could see was a dark doorway manifest itself on the side of the object that was denying me my free will. It was time for me to come face to face with God. I stepped inside, and as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see a figure sat in front of me. It was a being far greater than I could ever imagine. It was something utterly pure, so mesmerizing that tears of joy rolled down my face, and I timidly shut my eyes.
You have been blinded by the beautiful truth of my existence. Open your eyes, my child. It's time for salvation.
My eyes opened, and it was as if I had never felt true joy until that very moment. For the life of me, I couldn't conjure a single word, but the Emperor spoke again.
I have traveled to the edge of existence. I have found the meaning of life. I can share it with you. I can give you all the things you've ever wanted. I can be your salvation. All I ask in return is for your soul.
The God Emperor gestured towards the floor. There was a large opening at the base of his throne. I peered down, and I couldn't see anything, only darkness.
Step forward for a chance of life without pain, without heartache. Your salvation awaits you.
Suddenly, a loud explosion from outside of the orb shook the entire room, and I heard a loud screech coming from the Emperor. As I looked up at him, I was disgusted at what I saw. Gone was the sacred image of the God Emperor, and in its place was a long, grotesque creature with small, claw-like appendages protruding from its sides, and a slimy tail that defied gravity by holding a massive cranium with pulsating organs that looked like an oversized brain. The creature was hideous, but before I could turn to run, the tail wrapped around my feet and yanked me into the hole. As I fell, I looked up in horror. I could see the creature slowly fading itself back into the image of the God Emperor. I hope you guys enjoyed. Can't wait to talk to you guys in the comment section. And yeah, this is Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.